Censorship, I am doing this program. Let me just, here we go. All right, thank you for joining me, everyone. Charles Moscowitz here, and my guest is Patrick Wood. Patrick is the head of Citizens for Free Speech. They've got an excellent censorship. Doing this program. Let me just, here we go. All right, thank you for joining me, everyone. Charles Moscowitz here. Hold on, let me just get rid of this. And my guest is Patrick Wood. Patrick is the head of Citizens for Free Speech. They've got an excellent. There it is. Okay, Patrick. So Citizens for Free Speech. Thank you very much. Sorry about the echo there. I'm doing the program now every day, live from 12 noon to 1 p.m. And I'm determined to do it this year in spite of what is I've been told is shadow banning and censorship. I've had already a few things removed, not because I said anything that was outside of community standards, because I've been a radio talk show host in the past and I understand what community standards are, but it had more to do with speech. It had more to do with my opinions. There are certain areas that we are no longer allowed to discuss. It's that simple. And particularly on YouTube and on TikTok, where I am streaming live. Now, Patrick, I guess that you guys are really examiners of free speech and the siege on free speech, which seems to have accelerated with the installation of this new regime in Washington. And but before we go there, I just want to ask you a very practical question. And this is an argument that is brought up by people when I complain about YouTube censoring my program, and I've been told by people who know what they're talking about that my program has been shadow banned, because I'd be a lot bigger right now if it wasn't. And they've taken down a few things. But I'm told, well, this is a private company. What right? I mean, they're run by ad revenue, and advertisers don't want to have their advertising affiliated with unpopular opinions. So YouTube has a right to censor me and take me down. What do you say to that, Patrick?
This is a very difficult thing for people to kind of get their head around, but I'll give you an example. Let's say that you had a little house somewhere and you had a fence and a grass front yard, and somebody decided they didn't particularly like you, and they decided one day just to take a little detour off the street and run through your fence, through your lawn, do a donut and take off.
Mm-hmm.
And you come out in the morning to get your newspaper or whatever, and you see, well, what is this? There's somebody did a donut in my lawn, and how dare they? And I've been damaged. I've been, my economic interests have been hurt here. Somebody has caused me real harm, even though not me personally, but to my property. And you would seek to file a police report pretty quickly for something like that.
For sure.
Now, somebody could argue, the guy could argue, well, hey, it was my private car, and I'm sorry, I just kind of lost control temporarily, and I did a donut on the guy's yard, and, you know, it was an accident.
Mm-hmm.
You could say, well, you know what, that's too bad. You still damaged my property, you pay, you fix my yard.
Sure.
Well, when a company that has the power to do so, you have an economic interest in your program, you have an economic interest in your audience. It's your audience, not theirs.
Mm-hmm.
They come to listen to you, not to listen to YouTube. And so if YouTube does something to damage you, your audience, or your economic interest in your program, they have committed and I use this loosely, a crime against you. Now, obviously, there is no legal recourse right now that courts probably won't listen to you if you went in and said, well, you know, they shadow banned my program and they cost me, you know, they disadvantaged 5,000 listeners that wanted to listen, and the court probably throw it out.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean that the damage did not occur and that it could be understood by a layman in the terms I've just described.
Well, let me just kind of push back a little bit on this. Nevertheless, YouTube is technically a private company. It is not, they don't have to take anybody on their platform that they don't want. they say, well, we have community standards and we're not going to tell you what they are. I think there might be some legality around that. If they're going to have community standards, they ought to publish them very explicitly so that we know exactly what it is we can and can't say when we plan our programs. Because right now I'm kind of guessing, I'm kind of shooting in the wind here, wondering whether or not I'm, violating something. But at the end of the day, it is still a private company and they can say, hey, we're not going to put you on the show. I mean, isn't that the case? I mean, it's owned by its shareholders, it's owned by it's managed by its owners and by its, its executives, not by me. I mean, I'm just some poor schlub out here doing a YouTube show. They don't have to give me this platform.
Right. Right. Let me turn it around just a little bit differently. They are a private company, but we also know that in addition to just simple shadow banning, as you discussed, that's when the exposure of your program is reduced to your audience. Maybe only 10% of them see it, where really 100% should get some notice.
Correct.
That's one type of manipulation that a YouTube will put on, but they also put on another one that's even more draconian than that. When somebody goes to search for something on YouTube and they begin to type into the search box, whatever, you get suggestions, what other people might have, what you think.
And they can write down the SEO. That's right.
Right. You assume that somebody else searched for what you see in that chooser. But in fact, that's a very sophisticated artificial intelligence program that is reading your keystrokes and reading your history of maneuver, whatever you might do on YouTube or on Google or on other search engines or other platforms where they can capture that information and put it into their AI system. They present you with a type ahead list that is designed to manipulate you into seeing only certain things that they want you to see. And they use it in the sense that it manipulates you and your belief system to only show you one side of an issue that they want to show you.
Right.
They don't tell you that. They don't tell you, there's no notice on the screen that says that. It just happens, but it's been documented by whistleblowers very carefully. Now, here's my question.
Sure.
Does a YouTube or Google, which owns, of course, YouTube, right? They share a lot of the same algorithms.
Right.
Does YouTube / Google have some type of inherent right, because they're a private company, to manipulate your belief system? Well, to force feed you only what they want you to see and keep away anything that they don't want you to see on the periphery.
Well, this gets into an issue that's actually being debated in Congress right now, which is Google and is YouTube an editorial entity, or is it a public venue? There was actually a law passed by Congress, I think, early on in the .com boom, which gave them special immunity and privileges because they are a public entity, a public venue where people can express unpopular opinions, and they wouldn't have the liability for that, short of things like how to make a bomb. I mean, we're talking about, generally anyone who advocates violence, that should be banned. I think we all agree to that. But they got these immunities, but when they start to manipulate the algorithm and push your name down so you're not seen, and when they start to pull your videos because you said something that they don't like, and they demonetize you even though you reach a level where you qualify for monetization, that's already happened to me, then they're no longer offering a public venue. They have become no different than the New York Times or like any other, media entity, which can, censor. I mean, the Times decide that's what the editorial board does. They sit down and they decide, they have a point of view, and in that case, it's quite liberal. And if it doesn't fit their agenda, they don't publish it. They have a right to do that. Looks like we have a caller. No? Okay. And they have a right to do that. but they no longer have immunity. I mean, if they publish something slanderous or libelous, they can be sued. And I think that's the kind of the dichotomy here. That's because YouTube can't be sued because they have this immunity, but yet they're acting like an editorial entity by censoring people like me.
Yes, yes, I think you're right. You know, as a states' rights issue, people always talk about Section 230 at the federal level, and that's all fine and good. But we also know that Congress is pretty impotent right now. They haven't done anything to help us out here with this whole censorship issue. From a states' rights point of view, there's tremendous latitude on what states can do to push back against the manipulation that we're talking about here. Florida has kind of been leading the way on this. Governor DeSantis has come out and said, you know, I'm instructing my attorney general to go after these people directly. And, you know, this has nothing to do with Section 230 whatsoever. This is a states' rights issue. And he said that if anybody harms the people in Florida, we will go after them, and we will attempt to, you know, rectify the situation. So, for instance, he said that if any legitimate candidate that's on the the ballot to run for an election, or a sitting elected official of any kind, if anybody in Florida is banned from these platforms, they will begin receiving per incident $100,000 a day fine for as long as that breach takes place. And basically saying you will not deplatform our Republican or Democrat candidates, period. And if you do, you're going to pay. Now, a lot of people cheered him on when he said that, and
yeah. Not only that, but it's happening internationally. I think that Australia now has banned Facebook for a while because they were manipulating their election. Poland, the Czech Republic.
Yes.
You know, you have, I think France is talking about this. You've got nations pushing back and saying if you Facebook, Twitter, they're going to start to deplatform heads of state like they did to President Trump, or if they're going to start to deplatform candidates, they're going to have to pay $1 million fine. And I think that there is a growing awareness that these entities, they're private and they're powerful, but they basically, at this point, there's also the monopoly question, because at this point they control 98% of the market, and they have the ability to manipulate communication. That means it's like manipulating and regulating a phone call. You know, they don't have, no company has a right to do that, even though the telephone company is a private company. You know, so I think that it's starting to move in the direction of busting up these monopolies by local governments, state governments, nation states going after them and beginning to regulate them. And that can be a good thing. That's a good sign.
It can. And you can kind of, at this point, you can kind of picture that like a swarm of bees. That's kind of coming together, you know, around the world, and it's just giving these, you know, 1,000 little stings to these companies. Mm-hmm. And in the case of, by the way, of Australia and Facebook, because you just brought that up a second ago, Facebook had the mistaken idea that it could take on Australia and beat them to the ground. They thought they did. So at first, Facebook banned all stories originating from the continent. They said nobody's going to post anything that comes out of any media from Australia. I said at the time on my technocracy.news site, I said this is going to be the most regretted decision they ever made in their life. Less than 2 days later, Facebook capitulated, said, we're not, okay, we remove our ban on your whole subcontinent. And at the same time, we'll pay your news organizations for stories that get posted to Facebook, which is what, of course, the newspapers and, want down there. they feel like they're getting ripped off all the time when stuff appears on Facebook and, around the world. That was just another argument. I don't mean to take the side of Australia in this, but here you have a government entity on one hand and Facebook overplaying its hand on another hand, and boom, they come together and sparks ensue. And now Facebook has knuckled under to,
Right.
Yeah, so we're going to see this dynamic play out around the world as both sides, government will overplay its hand, Facebook will, the big tech will overplay their hand. There'll be big battles. There'll be all kinds of charges and counter charges and fines and licenses revoked and whatever.
Sure.
And it's going to get really messy on a global basis before it's done.
Right. Oh, for sure. And I think one of the byproducts of the Australia imbroglio was that tens of thousands of people canceled their Facebook accounts. And that's
right.
Ultimately not good news. Now, in the United States, and I think probably around the world, the general philosophy of big tech, which is liberal, left of center, prevailed in this past election. And when I say big tech, we're talking Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all the usual suspects, Google, to the point where during the election, they literally refused to allow reportage around the Democratic nominee Biden's son, to the point where they actually canceled the account of the New York Post, which is one of the nation's oldest newspapers. It was started by Alexander Hamilton, because they reported on this story. They decided we're going to delete this. This is a major story by any definition during a campaign. It was not good news for Biden, so they deleted it. You had senatorial candidate Marsha Blackburn, who's been a guest on my program, from Tennessee. In the election of 1998, all of her websites were deleted 3 weeks before the election. She couldn't raise money. She couldn't communicate. And then it went back up after there was outrage, and she won their election. But the thing is that they called it a quote unquote glitch, right? We've mistaken. And there are so many examples of these so-called glitches that always seem to favor liberals and delete conservatives. We've heard about glitches. I don't want to get into this, but it has to do with electronic voting. It's always favoring the liberals and never the conservatives. And now that they're in power, they seem to be ramping up the censorship. You have congressmen calling for the elimination of Fox News, which is a well-established news organization, and other such censorship. I mean, it's almost like, as you say, it's like communist China. What's going on with that, Patrick?
Well, we could probably make a truism here to say that historically, tyranny never voluntarily retreats on its own. And when tyranny begins to take a hold, and when it begins to assert itself, whether it be a mayor, county commissioners, a governor, or somebody on a national level, when tyranny asserts, it never gives up ground by definition until the fingers of tyranny are literally shattered by some other outside force, conquered, if you will, and then tyranny lets go. But until that happens, tyranny will never, ever retreat on its own. And further, you can always expect that tyranny will perpetuate itself. In other words, it will grow automatically if the fingers of it are not broken in the end. So what we see taking place, starting with this great panic of 2020 with the pandemic, as little pockets of tyranny have been established in various states around the country and around the world, but we're Americans, so we'll talk about America. These little pockets of tyranny have, to a single one, they've all expanded over a period of time. They've strengthened their hold over a period of time. And there's no sign whatsoever that they're going to give up voluntarily.
Mm-hmm.
They will worsen as time goes on. And so with the new Biden administration, you have this mentality for tyranny unchecked, completely unchecked. It's like all of a sudden there's a flood, a tsunami of issues that will embrace and reinforce the tyrannies that are already existing in society, little pockets of it. And those pockets will grow. It's like the worst abscess that you could have on your tooth. They do not get smaller with time. They will eventually eat your mouth up and completely destroy your bite.
Yeah.
So we can expect during the Biden administration, all other things being equal, tyranny will advance. People will be more and more frustrated as they try and get loose from these draconian rules and mandates and orders for this, that, and the other, whatever it might be. So guys, just leave us alone, please, and drop the state of emergency and, get on with it. But that's not what tyranny ever does. You can holler at it all you want. You can complain about it all you want. But the hollering and the complaining will not beat back the forces of tyranny. Just look at a place like New York and New York City right now.
Actually, let me just mention that. I think that the thing that'll beat back tyranny is that we still have a semblance of checks and balances in this country, which was the geniusness of the founding fathers when they established not just the constitutional system on a federal level, but state, local, on all levels, because it reflects the best elements of human life. You have to have checks and balances of power, of competing powers. And apparently in New York, as of yesterday, I believe, a judge has thrown out the irrational and draconian lockdowns. And everyone now can go back out. They can go to restaurants and stores. There's no more, laws against this. You don't have to put a piece of cloth on your face. And it's over. Basically, I mean, the pandemic itself, I think is over, even though they don't, they keep threatening a new, the new strain. But that hasn't seemed to have happened because the fact of the matter is that people have already been out. Everyone's ignoring it, and there hasn't been an increase. It's actually decreased.
Right.
So I think that it's being dismantled. They're not giving it up willingly. They probably would never give it up if they didn't have to. Because it's as you say, tyranny breeds itself. They love the power. But it is being thrown out by people operating in their own interests and by other branches of government who are stepping in.
Mm-hmm. So and I would have to say that this is representative of what has been called, I think appropriately so, the populist movement in America.
Yes, indeed.
And other countries as well. Now, the populist concept is caught on in a lot of different countries around the world. But
and growing. I mean, if you look, the Brexit movement in Britain, you've got France now has a Frexit movement, Northern Italy, Hungary, Poland, of course, Eastern Europe.
Catalonia.
Excuse me? Finland?
Catalonia also.
The Catalonians, Russia, now people hitting the streets. Hong Kong, you've got in China, you've got dissent. Dissent is growing, and you've got nationalist governments like that of Narendra Modi in India and Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil. They are popular, and they're basically capturing back the sovereignty of their own nations and returning power to the people. Exactly what Donald Trump did and intended to do, and that's a movement that's not going away. But the liberal establishment, which has assumed power, they're trying to not only censor and delete any opposition, but they're engaging in some very troubling sort of, investigating, anyone who disagrees with the election. We don't want to even, I can't even talk about that on YouTube, is now going to be deemed as a terrorist and as an insurrectionist, as a criminal, including sitting members of Congress. So, this is a real struggle. This is a battle that's
Yes.
undergoing.
Yes, it really is. And the one thing that really scares the forces of globalization to death is this populist movement.
Indeed.
And this is where we see the battle right now. And the only reason I really bring it up is that if there's going to be any ultimate pushback to tyranny in America, especially, it's going to be coming from the populist movement at large. There's no other force, there's no other group, there's no other ideas in America that has the will and the desire to do anything about this, except for the populist movement. It's going to be an interesting battle to see how it plays out and see how people actually respond and, take after these forces of tyranny. But it's not just government, of course, that's doing this. We're talking about all the big tech, mixing it up with, with government tyrants at the same time. A lot of competition going on there, but in some cases, big tech has more power than does even the government.
And, the classic definition of fascism is a collusion between select monopolistic oligarchic businesses and government working hand in glove. I mean, that's what Mussolini did in Italy. I mean, instead of having a parliament or a Congress, he had a council of corporations. There were select corporations in Italy that were given special powers over their own competition, and they in turn supported the dictator, who was then glorified, and his oligarchy. And that's in a very informal sense, not as extreme, but that is a tendency that's going on right now, because you have the ruling elites, the oligarchs, working hand in glove with big tech. They all are on the same side. Big tech has a monopolistic control. Look, they got rid of Parler, which was competing with Twitter and actually taking Twitter on almost at par with Twitter. All of a sudden, they're gone because they got Amazon, Google, Twitter. They basically colluded to have Parler deplatformed. Mm-hmm. They're back, but the point is they were gone for a long time. They removed the sitting president of the United States. No, has been banned from social network. This is fascism in the informal sense. It's not Mussolini. I'm not saying that, nor am I saying that they're involved with concentration camps or, they're not anti-Semitic or anything like that. That's not the point. Those things are that's a European historical thing. I'm talking about an American brand, which is this very unholy relationship between select businesses, most of whom are on the left, and the present government, who they helped install, may I add.
That's right. And we see this collusion taking place on at least a case-by-case example. For instance, when Amazon teams up with the various intelligence agencies to offer master data storage facilities and cloud services. This is an interesting contractual relationship that has exposed the underbelly of our intelligence system to a private organization.
They've always colluded with media. I mean, there was testimony in the late 70s, the Church Committee, which showed this so-called Operation Mockingbird, where they were literally paying satchels of cash to media people to cover stories in a way that they wanted them covered. And and they, the CIA and all of them, the secret society, they are secret societies, they're secret organizations. They tend to be liberal establishment. They tend to be left of center. They're into authority. They want to preserve an elite, and they want to interact and interconnect with other national, international agencies of like nature. And they don't have a lot of respect for, I think, American sovereignty and American individual rights and freedoms.
They really don't. And it is important to realize that we identify these companies as being homegrown American companies. That is a Google, for instance, in Silicon Valley, and a Facebook, so on. We've always just kind of thought, well, these were American inventions and they're American companies and they ought to have some loyalty to America. This is patently false. They have grown up into global corporations now. They have no loyalty whatsoever to the United States, any more than they do to Australia or Germany or anywhere else. And so these companies collectively now are operating according to a different elevation. They're not operating as if they have any respect for American law, American Constitution, or anything else. They have no respect whatsoever for it. They're global corporations now, and they're behaving as global corporations.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I forget the comment, but I think it was made by the CEO of the Boeing company a while back, where he acknowledged this. He goes, "Hey, we're doing business with China. We're doing business with India. We don't have to, we're no longer an American company. We're a global company. We don't answer to any one nation. In fact, if anything, nations answer to us. I mean, the whole world is a corporation now. Sort of like, was like from the line Howard Beale in the movie Network. The world is a business." Right. One big corporation has been so since we climbed out of the slime. That's the condition of humanity. Yeah. All right. So, Patrick, what can we do as patriotic, nationalist, populist, traditionalist citizens who want to continue to assert our freedom and have some level of control over our own personal destinies and that of our families?
Absolutely. This is precisely why I founded citizensforfreespeech.org in 2018, was to defend and support the First Amendment. And the question is, how do you do that? Well, this is not an esoteric concept that we have free speech. We could debate it, but that's not the point. The point is the ability to communicate as embodied in the First Amendment, and that there's 5 different elements, but all of which are concerning communicating. These are inalienable rights that were given, that were noted at least in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. The First and the Second Amendment, the right to self-defense and the right to communicate, those were rights not given by man in the first place, and theoretically then can't be taken away by man either, but they're working on it. Okay, they're pretty hard.
Oh yeah,
but here's the thing. Mm-hmm. People need to get back into their local communities and exercise their First Amendment, I believe, God-given rights to communicate with other people in a community. We need to ignore the tyranny coming from a higher level and go into our own communities and reestablish real human relationships with people again. Take the mask off, talk to people nose to nose, face to face. You don't have to agree with them on everything, but you have to dialogue, whether you like it or not. And if you don't have a seat at the table in your community, whatever that seat might be, could be city council oriented, could be an education board, could be a water board, could be property rights, zoning issues, whatever. If you don't have a seat at the table, you are what's for dinner tonight. And people need to get a grip on this. All of this stuff trickled down like acid rain from heaven, coming down on our local communities. And all of a sudden, you've got all these people in your local communities who are quote unquote woke, and they're bringing in all of these policies that nobody really wants or likes. The only way to get rid of it is to get up there and mix it up.
Get up there, and also, I mean, I would go one step further, and I've been an advocate of this for a while. I did it myself many years ago. You have to start running for local office. If you do, and you can do it and win at very little money. I mean, and it's just a matter of getting out and doing as you say, Patrick, going to these meetings, meeting people, setting up a little organization. There's all this free media, as bad as it is, you can put up a Facebook page. You can go to your local cable and get a television program, and once a week go on there and bring up an issue you want to talk about. And you'll find that a lot of these local offices, including the state houses, state rep, state senator, they're held by people who have been there for a decade and haven't ever really had any opposition, who haven't done a damn thing.
Right.
And you can do it if you're a housewife,
Yes.
if you're retired, if you're a teenager, if you have your empty nest, your children are going off to college, you have a little time on your hands. It is a tremendous thing to do. It is a great contribution to freedom.
Yes.
It is a great public service. I urge anyone to do this. And you can win is the amazing thing. And even if you don't win, you'll have a few issues knocked over the plate because the media won't be able to ignore you. You'll get some interviews and you'll get to make your points. And that can change the culture.
Yes, it absolutely can. And I saw a statistic ranging as high as 30% of elected positions in local community settings, and that's at all levels. I'm not talking about the mayor or the county supervisor or something, but at all the various levels where people can be elected in a local community, as many as 30% of them run unopposed.
Oh, I know it. I mean, you could run for Register of Deeds.
All you have to do is put your name in the...
Get a few signatures. And by the way, some of these gigs are pretty good too, I may add. You get an office and you get a little salary, nothing wrong with it. You could get in there and you could really start to get into the inside of these meetings and bring up issues and take notes and find out what the heck they're doing. I mean, these are people who have an influence on our future and on our freedoms, and you should be in that and doing it. That's a great.
Fully agree. 100% agree.
So, Patrick, let my listeners and viewers know where they can read your excellent publication and anything else you'd like to share.
Well, the main thing is at citizensforfreespeech.org, we encourage every American to come and put their name on the line with us. There's no excuse for somebody not at least doing that much to say, I will, at least mentally, I'll make a pledge to support and defend the First Amendment in our country. And secondly, that you might take action at some point yourself.
Indeed.
But that's the first thing to do, is to just join with us on a general level. If you choose to become a volunteer beyond that, we'll begin to give you tools, training, collateral, encouragement, mentoring, the tools to be able to do meetups and things like that on a local basis. We'll support you every possible way we can so that you can achieve the issues or success in the issues that you're interested in your community. We do not preach issues, by the way. I want to stress that. If you don't have the issues coming to us in the first place in your mind, don't look to us to be a Facebook or something to you to tell you what the issues are. You can figure that out for yourself. You got some hot button, whatever, great. We don't care what it is. As long as you want to do something about it, then we can help you.
Excellent. All right, Patrick Wood, I want to thank you for joining me this afternoon. Great talking with you as always.